Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 174. And once again, I brought back Carl Bahner onto the show. And this is kind of a different episode. We talk about delegation, the do's and the don'ts. So a little bit different than what we usually do here on Secret Sonics, but it's a super important topic. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about and been doing a lot over the last year or so. And going to be doing a lot more this coming year. And Carl is one of the people that put that idea in my brain of this is something you can do. And it's really been really eye-opening for me and pretty amazing. And so I thought this would be a helpful conversation for me and Carl to have and for you to listen to it. So I hope you enjoy it. Coming up right here on Secret Sonics, my chat with Carl Bahner talking about delegation, the do's and the don'ts. Hey everyone, if you're a music studio professional who wants to build deeper relationships with better clients, former guest of the show, Carl Bahner, has created some free educational resources for you. The link is in the show notes below, so go check it out. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. I'm joined today by sort of co-host Carl Bahner, who's a two-time guest on the show, and I guess this is his third time, and he's joining us kind of as like a co-host. I thought to do like a topical conversation with him. Yeah, I thought it would be more interesting than me kind of spewing out another solo cast, which I did last week. Basically, if you ever host a podcast, like don't try to book people around the end of the year and the beginning of the year because nobody's around. Everyone's like, I'm in Israel, so I'm totally aloof to this because I'm like working on the Jewish calendar. But the truth is the Jewish New Year is like a terrible time in Israel to book these things. So I get it. But anyways, I kind of ran out of episodes, even though I have plenty of people lined up. And that's the story. But rather than me spewing out another solo cast, I thought, let's have Carl on and we could talk about something smart.
Hopefully we'll talk about something smart. We'll definitely talk. The smart is up for debate.
The smart is always up for debate. But you know what? Good conversations always lead to, ideas and insights. So I'm a big believer in conversations. And like, it's kind of where I'm at also with podcasts. Like I prefer to listen to a good conversation than to listen to one of the more like maybe produced podcasts about a topic that's almost like a TV show or a documentary. I find like I'd rather just watch TV. But to listen to a conversation, I don't know, like my brain percolates,
Yeah, it's very voyeuristic of you. To like prefer that,
yeah,
like that. You
think so?
I mean, it's not really. I guess it's not really eavesdropping if they're intending for it to be made public. But that's interesting that you have a preference of listening to conversations. I love, I'd much rather have a conversation than make a scripted long form podcast. Even though my podcast is scripted, but
right.
but that's why this is fun, and I'm looking forward to talking about today's topic.
Yeah, totally. So the topic of the day is delegation, the do's and the don'ts. This is Carl's working title. And I mean, basically, it's interesting because delegation is something that I've been really doing over the last year. Before that, much less. And I'm pushing it even further this year. And I know Carl's been doing it for even longer than me and even harder than me. So I think this is just a great conversation to talk about, like, when's it time to, start delegating things and what are the best practices? How do you do it? And like you said, the do's and the don'ts. So do you want to tee us up for the first do and don't?
Yeah. So these are in no particular order. I was laying in bed at like 11 o'clock last night when I got I forget. I think it was around that time when we started talking because it was early morning where you are, late night where I am. And
it was like the perfect hour, like the 11 p.m. by you and 6 a.m. by me.
Yeah. So I'm there laying in bed. He's there getting out of bed. And I started, these ideas just kind of came to me because this is something that actually came up in a couple different conversations with some friends and peers of mine over the past week, like a lot of times. With unrelated friends. And I just felt like this is the perfect thing to talk about because it's fresh on my mind, at least. And I know it's something that you and I had talked about, the last time that we caught up on Zoom. So these are in no particular order. They're just some pretty foundational things to keep in mind when you get to the point that you're ready to actually start delegating tasks as a music production professional or any kind of like creative professional that wants to get a little bit of help, but is maybe intimidated by the thought of relinquishing a little bit of control, which I think is something that we all deal with.
I think a lot of us producer type people, we crave that control over these things, and that's, I think, one of the biggest things that holds a lot of us back from doing that, because we want to make sure that everything is to our standard, because we have a vision, and for whatever reason we're often perfectionistic kind of people. And so delegation is hard because we want to have control over every last aspect of the production process. But if you do that, it's kind of very difficult to do a lot. Like, I find, like, I guess the best way for me to say this is there's bottlenecks. And like for me, like, let's say tuning vocals is a bottleneck, because I'll just it's the kind of thing I'll procrastinate, and I just like won't finish a production because I don't feel like tuning vocals. And so, all this work is piling up, and then the bigger projects don't get finished, so to speak. Like just to speak from my own personal experience.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. And I think, back to your back to your comment about wanting to have control over everything, I kind of like to think about a sheepdog, right? That's going to try to wrangle a whole bunch of sheep in the direction that they want to go. And if I were a sheepdog, well, first off, I'd be a terrible sheepdog because I'd be the one wandering off. But
you have to grow your beard out again first.
I would have to do that. But if you think about it, put yourself in the position of a sheepdog, and you're looking at all the different tasks that you have. Just bear with me, Ben. Don't laugh. Just
it's just a funny analogy.
Okay, but imagine you're a sheepdog, and instead of sheep, it's all the different tasks that you have to do for your job, right? You could try to wrangle all of them. So let's say that there's 50 sheep, right? Or there's 50 different tasks that you have to do. Everything as important as doing the actual mix itself to as unimportant as backing up. Not that backing up files is unimportant, but like, it's not the creative. It doesn't require your creative input to back up files. It doesn't require your creative input to, let's say, send an invoice, right? So let's think
it's
of
not like the highest dollar value of your time, basically.
Yeah, also. It's not something that you like that only Ben can do, right? There are things that only Ben can do, and there are things that some software can do, an assistant can do, an intern can do.
Exactly.
You could be the sheepdog running around trying to wrangle all 50 tasks that you need to do. And yeah, you'll have control over all of them, but not nearly as much control as if you only had to focus on 5 sheep, right? You'd be able to put all of your focus in making sure that those 5 sheep are going exactly where you want to go, right? So you'd probably be able to get from point A to point B a heck of a lot faster.
Right.
And I like to look at it that way when I think about delegating, and the less control that I need to have, the more energy I can put into focusing the things that really do require Carl to be doing it, and I can get from point A to point B faster.
Yeah, I love that. So good.
I never thought of that analogy before. I'm glad I didn't just fall flat on my face. Yeah.
No, totally. It basically, because you're eliminating the amount of tasks, you can actually even be more perfectionistic if you wanted to be, or be like, just have more control, more, you can execute your vision higher because you're doing the most, I don't know what the term is, like the most high level tasks.
Yeah.
That need that quality touch, and the things that are kind of a little bit more like anyone could do it, not necessarily you, that's the stuff that you can start delegating, and then, moving along faster, so to speak.
Yeah. So that said, I am going to start with my first do and don't. Okay. And again, this is not in any particular order, but this is something I always tell my friends or students or peers when they tell me that they want to delegate. I tell them, do need to expect the first few projects to suck. And don't expect anyone to fully grasp your preferences and quirks right away, right? Like, your tastes took years to develop. The way that you edit drums, the way that you edit vocals, the way that you like to, any task within like within your process that you're trying to potentially have somebody help with, it took you years to develop your tastes and preferences on how to do that thing. So for you to expect anybody else to learn that on the first try is ridiculous. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a phrase that I heard, and I wish I knew where I heard it first, but it's not that you get what you pay for, you get what you train for. And I
I like
love
that.
that. And so many people that I've talked to, they'll try, hiring a vocal editor or hiring a drum editor. Those are just two examples that I've seen pretty commonly within my circle, where they'll hire somebody out. It comes back. It's not quite what they want. And then they don't delegate ever again for another 2 years until they're underwater scrambling, just trying to get through
To
the projects that
survive.
they have. And then they do it again. They hire somebody else and it comes back and it's not perfect. And therefore, in their mind, it's not the lack of training that was the problem. It was the act of delegation that was the problem. But if you go into it expecting the first few projects to suck, I call it the first pancake principle. I'm sure there's like other ways of saying that, but like the first pancake always sucks, right?
Yeah,
It's
totally.
always either burnt or undercooked. It's never great because you're still getting, you're
getting that griddle up in to the right temperature,
to the right
amount of grease.
Exactly. You're getting it to the point that you can kind of predict, that you could predict and control it and trust that it can do its thing. But until you have a sense of how hot the griddle is, how, it's I don't want to get into like food science.
When to flip it.
When to flip it. Yeah. Like until you build your confidence with that, the pancakes are going to suck. Right. And I think a lot of people in our roles as, mixers, producers, engineers, we expect that first pancake to be perfect. And if that pancake's not perfect, we just give up entirely and we're back to square one.
Yeah. And that's a big problem. And so I mean, I guess like the thing that I've been delegating most this past year was starting with editing my own podcast, because I just couldn't do it anymore because it was just taking up too much of my week. And so, I had to train the person to edit it the way I do, right? And I guess that's probably the next task. But the point is that the first one was not perfect, and I had to go through the entire thing and make sure that I fixed any mistakes. But like that's part of the process, because it took a couple episodes to be smooth sailing, maybe 3 episodes even,
Yeah.
But yeah, like you had to train the person, right? Like basically Gavi, who edits the show, like it took like a few episodes for him to get it really down pat, and I literally trained him and I showed him everything I do, right? So it's like, I'm going to edit my podcast for 30 minutes and you're going to watch every single move I make.
Yep.
And then I'm going to send you the podcast and you're going to edit it for 30 minutes and I'm going to watch every single move you make. And then I'm going to let you finish it, and then I'll run through it and make sure everything's cool. And then I'll touch base about the things that you did right and the things you did wrong afterwards. And it's just like a communication of like, let's continue to get this better and smooth this process out. I've been working with a guy named Benjamin Kogan, who's also was a former guest of the show, doing clips for me now. He's editing out my reels and stuff. And the first few were a little bit choppy, and every single time we hashed it out and we said, okay, this is really what I'm looking for. And by now he basically knows what I'm looking for. And so now we're all these clips later, like I don't have to do nearly as much explanation. Maybe a few here and there is based on something particular, but he knows kind of already what I'm going for and how to edit it, So It's like that longer, it takes some time, but it's also an important thing of what I've noticed, and maybe you could tell me the same thing, is you have to find somebody who is like in your mindset, like there is like a level of, they have to understand what you are and what you're going for. Because I tried to work with somebody who didn't really understand, and it didn't really seem to matter how much I trained them. It wasn't going to fully click, and I had to give up that delegation person,
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, you have to find somebody that understands your target audience too.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Not that they have to be your target audience, but that they have to understand who it is. And that's going to, in the sense of, or in the case of your podcast editing, or in the case of the social media content, right? That's probably not as relevant to like vocal editing as an example, right? But still, like they need to know, what the end goal is, not just what the task at hand is, but like what are we trying to achieve with this? What is this task helping us to achieve? Is it helping us to get more polished vocals? Is it helping us to get tighter, more modern drum sounds? Is it helping us to be a pattern interrupter on TikTok? What are the goals of the task that they're doing? Which I think when they understand that, it's going to click a lot faster to what they're actually doing and how they can not just do what you ask them to do, but find weaknesses in your in the workflow that you showed them, where they can find a way to make it even better.
Right. And then you're onto something good, right?
Yeah.
If they're improving your workflow, then
And
you're really in the right direction.
yeah, which brings me to they're out of order. So this is the third one on our list, but this is number 2 of the do's and don'ts. Because you mentioned when you were training Gavi to do the edits and how you sat down with him and he watched you. What I say here is I had said to be granular with your explanations. And ideally, like what I like to do is I'll film a video of myself going through the process and explaining it as I go. If I can, ideally, I do it while I'm training the person. Like, let's say that I'm training somebody to set up my mix preps.
Mm-hmm.
We could hop on Zoom. I can screen grab the conversation, so that way,
Right.
number one, I'm showing them in real time so they can ask follow-up questions if I skip over anything unintentionally, which happens a lot because there are so many autopilot things that you do in your workflow that you might not even realize until you go to actually explain it, which is why getting granular is very helpful. But you're able to express it and explain it in real time. They're able to give you follow-up questions if you don't explain something clearly, but then also they'll have that video to refer back to.
Yes. And they could watch it at their free leisure or when they get lost or something.
Exactly. So the don't I have that goes along with that is don't make any assumptions about their prior experience with a particular task. Right. And I think that's something that a lot of people do. And I know I'm using vocal editing and drum editing as an example, but a lot of people
They're great examples.
But yeah, I hope so. But
yeah, they totally.
With drum editing,
those are definitely bottlenecks for me. So
yeah, and I know a lot of producers that wish that they could delegate drum editing, but they're very particular about how they want to do it, right? But they don't go to the trouble of actually explaining what they're looking for, like really explaining it and really getting the person trained in how to do it the way that they want. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the first pancake, right? They don't fully granularly explain how they want things to be done, even though in their minds they're very picky. They don't express that pickiness and they don't show how to achieve that, how to get over that bar of expectations. And then when the person you're delegating, the delegatee, I guess, when they don't nail it the first time, well then, I can't do this. I'll just do it myself. It's easier to do it myself. And you know what? The first couple times that you delegate these things, yeah, it would be quicker to do it yourself, right? Like,
of course, that's the whole point.
That's the whole point. Like, I want the first few projects to take longer than it normally would, because let's say it takes 5 projects, like 5 songs worth of drum editing to get so and so trained to edit them for me. I want to train her so well that after that 5th one, I don't have to say a word, right? So if I'm going to be doing, I'm just pulling a number out, but let's say 40 songs a year where there needs drum editing, right? I will happily make those first 5 take as long as they need to really get my ideas across to her, so that, songs 6 through 40 of this year, and then all the songs next year, all the songs after that, all of those are going to be smooth sailing.
Exactly.
And people get scared by the idea of spending more time on the first few projects to get to that point, because the whole reason they want to delegate is they're short on time, right? They feel overwhelmed. They want to be able to pass this off to somebody else. But to be able to do that effectively, you have to suck it up and just like go through the stress of training somebody, because it will be worth it. And very few people are willing to just put in that work.
I mean, it's like buying new studio monitors, right? They cost a lot of money, but then your mixing is going to get much better, and then that will pay for itself right back. You know what I mean? Like I saved up a year for my monitors, and they paid for themselves so much faster than I could have imagined. And you know what? Like I had to do that investment, that time and money investment.
Yeah.
But then it paid dividends down the road big time. And it's the same thing with delegation. Like, you're going to have to put up front, like, the investment of time is the thing at the beginning, but then you get that all back down the road, hopefully.
Yeah.
Once the person you've trained is like in a flow with you and in sync. It's almost like my thought was like it's humbling almost. Like you have to get over yourself. Like you think you're so unique in the way you do things, but actually everything like you do that is so unique, you could probably train somebody else to do it if you spent enough time showing them how.
Yeah.
And also like that person could do so much more than that person can't necessarily do everything you think they might be able to do, but with enough training they can. And so like we're all, have to learn to let go and learn to teach, and
Hey everyone, if you've made it this far into the episode, then you're probably a fan of podcasts that help your personal development in the music industry. Former guest of the show and fellow podcaster Travis Ferentz hosts Progressions, a show about finding success in the music business. If you dig Secret Sonics, I have a feeling that you might enjoy his angle too. You can go check it out via the link in the show notes below. So go check it out. All right, back to the episode.
And a good way to start is by my next do and don't.
Do and don'ts.
Start with a menial task. And don't start with a complicated creative task. So if, using drum editing again as the example, I'm not going to start somebody with I'm not producing 7-minute tech death metal songs, but like if I were a extreme metal producer and I wanted to outsource drum editing, I wouldn't start somebody with a 7-minute epic with, 256th notes throughout half of the song, right? So even something as simple as, for me, the very first thing that I started delegating, which is weird to think of it as delegating, but it is, was mastering. It was the first thing that I started bringing somebody else onto the team that could do something it's something that I could do. It's something I do. It's something I do for other clients. But there are some situations, like when I know that I'm going to lose objectivity by the time I get to the mastering stage. There are situations where hiring somebody else to do the mastering, even though I can do it, is the right move. It's the right move for the song. It's the right move for the client. It's the right move for my ears, my mental health. And the next thing that I did was outsourcing my mix preps. Because again, that's like mastering is obviously that's like not a menial task. So I guess that's the exception to starting with the menial task. But that's like hiring that's outsourcing to another pro, I guess. But delegating like mix preps, like that's generally pretty simple. And it might seem complicated when you have to explain it for the first time, but humans have big brains. They can learn stuff. Like you can train this person,
and you can record it while you teach it to them.
Yeah,
so that
you
always referenceable.
Exactly. And if I can make a little hot take right now, I think
let's do it.
A little hot take.
I always want hot takes.
I think the hesitance to delegate actually comes from insecurity, and it's not because they think the other person can't do a good job. It's we have a natural instinctive the sense that we are the best at what we do. There's the ego, this bit of unspoken cockiness that I think we all really feel like, oh no, I can't delegate that because nobody can do that as well as I can, which frankly is bullshit, right?
Yeah,
like that's especially when it's something like editing or mix preps. Like, no, you're just impatient. You don't want to train somebody. You're afraid of paying somebody $15 to do something that you could be making those $15. But if you could spend that time doing one of the tasks, one of the fewer sheep, like in that analogy earlier, one of the fewer sheep that actually makes you a lot more money per hour, then getting that $15 an hour project off your plate opens you up to make 30, 50, 100, 200, whatever that number is.
Yeah.
And getting past that hump of paying somebody else for something that you can do, it's scary. But that fear comes from the insecurity.
Yeah. I think actually the insecurity also could be the other way around of like, maybe like, I don't know, I'm thinking about mastering. So like maybe this is not the menial tasks, but like, the first time I sent off my record to be mastered, I was so scared of what the mastering engineer would think. And it's like, oh, he's going to think I'm shit at this. And I was so nervous for somebody in that position to hear my mixes, for the first time. And so there was a bit of insecurity about like, hey, I'm opening up the thing that I'm trying to do to somebody else who's like totally professional, to see all the warts and everything, and actually like put me in my place of where I'm at, And so it's it's the other side of the equation, I guess. It's like the other kind of insecurity, but amazing. So start with a menial task, and don't start with the complicated creative task.
Yeah.
But can you eventually get to complicated creative tasks?
Of course. I mean, it depends on how willing you are to train, how patient you are to train, how much of the budget you're willing to sacrifice to get that help. And it depends on how, which activity or which task in your project or in your workflow makes you the most money. And figuring out those priorities and what actually makes you money, what doesn't, what really does have the prerequisite of Ben being the one doing it versus not Ben can do it.
Yeah, totally. Also, I wanted to say something about the fact that you were saying like, you think only you can do it, but actually other people can do it. And maybe they could even figure something out that's even better because they have a different brain. I mean, I talk about this a lot on the show of like two heads are better than one, right? Like the synergy, effect of like, when we do it all by ourselves, we're really like in our own echo chamber, and we really don't. We're really limited with just our own brains. And once you have even two brains, like the effect can be, more than times two, right? Like the fact that like it's just not just one brain looped in on itself.
Yeah.
And so I've been finding like bringing in a team is just like starting with mastering, for example. It makes such a better product because it's like you've just brought in somebody else with a total different set of objectivity, like objectivity and like ideas and like you just get a much better product because of that. So yeah.
And not to mention, it also allows you to stay more in the zone of the things that you want to do. It's not even just a question of will you have more control and more time to spend on the things that are important, but it's the other side of that coin is that it's fewer times that you're going to be pulled out of that creative flow.
Yeah. We get when you have so many tasks, you get so distracted by all the other things. It's kind of hard to like stay on point. And that's a real, there's like a cost to switching tasks, which is maybe more than the amount of time you think it is.
Yeah. Especially when it's tasks that don't actually move the needle, but they are just to-do list items that you feel good about doing it because you're checking something off your list, but it's really not really doing much for your career or as much as some other tasks really could. And not all to-do list items are created equal.
Absolutely. I mean, just to go back to like tuning vocals, for example, like tuning vocals is like a big bottleneck for me. And it's like, I find it, and this is a problem I have, is it's harder for me to finish big projects than small projects. Because small projects is like, okay, cool, let's just do this and get it over with. And then a big project has so many different stages. And then once there's a bottleneck, you just don't move on to the next stage. And then that stage doesn't get completed.
Yeah.
And it's like, if that other stage is just easily delegated towards, before you know it, that person's happy to work and make money, and then they'll just send it right back to you. And then you're just moving on to the next stage without thinking about it, without procrastinating it. And it's just like it's a way to really jump forward with the things you're doing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you want to do the last do's and don'ts?
Yeah. So the last one that I've got, the last one that I have here, and this goes back to, as you're figuring out what you want to delegate, what you can delegate, and where on that spectrum of, only Carl can do these things is on one side, and software or, a monkey with a keyboard could do these things. Where on that spectrum do the different tasks lie? Because it's not black and white, right? There's a lot of gray area in there. So depending on what kind of priority the particular task is and how much creative input and how much creative input is needed, and therefore how much trust you need to have in the person that you're hiring, that is going to affect what is the fair wage for that task. So I always do say, do pay a fair wage and don't hire the cheapest option, because they're cheap for a reason. Now, I'm not saying that you should pay the intern that is just setting up your mix sessions,
just out of SAE or Full Sail or something.
Yeah, I'm not saying pay them $70 an hour, right? But I am saying, like, they should be paid. They should be paid. Like, if you can pay your interns, pay your interns. Like, that's, or if you're having your intern do something that you would have otherwise hired an assistant to do or outsourced it to, just pay the intern to do it. That's my thing. But depending on what that task is, be willing to pay different amounts depending on that task. So something that is much more menial, like file prep or something, I'm not going to pay as much money to get somebody to do that as I would for vocal editing, because I work in pop music. Vocals are very important and the editing is very important. So I want to make sure that I am getting somebody that not only is really great at what they do, but has the confidence and is doing it professionally and charges accordingly. I want somebody that has that confidence in their own skills. So what a fair wage is subjective and is different from task to task, from region of the world to region of the world. But the cheapest option is always, no matter where you are, no matter what the task is, the cheapest option is usually a pretty good thing to avoid.
Yeah, totally. You want to be not in the race to the bottom end of the spectrum, so to speak. And also, when you pay people more, I think that they're more dedicated to you, and they appreciate what you're doing more, and will want to stick around for longer. And then you won't have to train the next person, right? And do another investment of your time in that sense. You kind of want, if you're delegating something, hopefully the person is going to stick around for a while.
Yeah.
And so you want them to feel motivated to stick around for a while. And if you pay them a decent wage, that's like a really good way to do that,
And think of it this way. When you're trying to figure out what to pay somebody else to do this, and you're being tempted into being the cheapskate, ask yourself, how much do I love getting cheapskate clients? Because I don't love that. I don't like dealing with that.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure anybody listening to this is going to agree with that and say that, no, those are the worst kind of clients. And then my advice to you is, don't be that client.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be the cheapskate.
I'm paying people that are helping me, like, at least what I was making, when I was first starting, and I was like, working when, if not more, and giving them like a leg up because they're getting experience I didn't have when I was, a decade plus ago,
And that said, it brings up a good point that a fair wage doesn't always have to be financial. Like, if you do have an intern that really does want, maybe you're not there, you can't pay them for certain things, or there's certain projects that just don't have a budget and they want to learn, like, pay them in actual experience.
Yeah.
I won't take on an intern unless I can make sure that they're really going to feel like they're getting more out of it than I am.
That's amazing.
Right? Like, I'll tell a story that my last intern, Ethan, told me. He became my intern last spring and ended up becoming a really good friend, started hiring him as my assistant, and he's been doing assistant stuff for me for a while now. But he was telling me a story where he was maybe like 2 months into his internship with me in this past spring semester. And he got, I think I got an email from a friend of mine, another studio in town, that was looking for somebody to engineer a session for audiobook or podcast. It was some like voiceover project, and they needed an engineer. And I said, hey, you should have Ethan come in and do it. He's been working with me. He's killing it. I'll put you in contact. I'm not sure what his rate is, but I can talk to him about that. Like, I wanted to make sure I put it in their mind that you gotta pay this kid. And we work it out. He ends up getting pretty decent hourly for somebody technically still being in college, has the responsibility of going into a studio. he hasn't worked out of before, running a session for a client for a studio that he hasn't, for like the owners he hasn't met before, all because I said, hey, no, do this here, go here, do this project, meet these people, make this money, go. While he's there, he meets the intern that studio has. I'm not going to say what the studio is, but he starts talking to the intern to say like, oh, hey, I'm doing my internship too. What are you doing? And basically the other intern was just saying that he's just been kind of, cleaning the bathroom and, making coffee and just kind of observing every once in a while. And that was eye-opening for Ethan, in a good way. And also eye-opening for me, I think, in a good way as well, because it makes me feel good about the way that I handle it and the way that I want to do it, because I want to make sure that my interns or my assistants, whatever they are, if I can't give them the money that I would like to give them, then I want to make sure that they're at least getting the educational value out of it, the experiential value out of it, like you said, because getting free work out of somebody or getting cheap work out of somebody and in return just like having them clean your toilet is not cool in my book.
Absolutely. I mean, I go back to when I was a waiter, you know what I mean? Like, like think about how you felt when, you didn't really feel like you were much of a person.
Yeah.
And try to like, give these people who are more towards the beginning of their careers, presumably, a chance to feel valid and
yeah.
And like they could do something with themselves also,
Yeah.
That's great. I love that. Yeah. Like, I don't know. My only other point with that was, like Gavi, for example, who who I've been delegating the podcast editing to. And this other guy, Zvi, now that I'm hiring to do some other podcast editing for me, like they know that like they have me available to answer like any random audio questions, and I'm here, and like, I'll meet up with them and get a beer and we'll talk shop, and like it's, they know that there's something beyond just the actual work that I'm delegating towards them, and I hope that they feel like they're getting that value out of it. I'm all about that. And also, it's fun to give things over when you get to a certain age. I don't know, like, not that I'm so old, but like, at 35, it's fun to give things over. Like, you don't want to, just only do everything by yourself. It's first of all, it's fun to chat, to talk shop, and it's fun to pass it on to the next generation.
Especially when you're like me and I'm, basically 100% remote, so I'm here by myself all day. So pulling in other people into my team and delegating, if nothing else, gives me an excuse to talk to other humans, which especially in the pandemic age, like that's more helpful for our mental health than we might realize or might be aware of.
Yeah. Absolutely. The constant like what's the word? Liaisoning with like different people, and just like, you're not just by yourself in your room debating if you're any good or if you're a worthwhile human being. You're in part of a team and you're having conversations. It's like a virtual water cooler kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Amazing. I don't know if I have any other thoughts on this. I don't know. How about you, Carl? This is great.
I always have a million thoughts, but
why don't you spew on one of them? Why don't you wax poetic on one of those thoughts, and we'll draw the interview or the conversation really to a close.
Ooh. Oh, there's so many. I just have so many. Like, I feel like a snowball, or like a snow globe right now. And just like I think the last thing that I'll say, and this should apply for everything that you do in your career, but make sure that you openly communicate your expectations. And that sounds similar to being granular with your explanations, but I think there are a lot of things that we explain to do, and there's expectations about the actual task itself, but then there are other expectations that may go unsaid and assumptions that end up being made. Like, how soon do we need to have this back by? But yeah, that's a great one. Let's start with that. So
that was something I was actually thinking about as you started talking about that.
Yeah, just something clear and saying, hey, I want to sub this out to somebody, but I need to have this back by before Friday at noon. Is that doable? And if it's not doable, totally cool, but I just need to know so I can find somebody else that can do it.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
and making it clear that, hey, if something comes up and like it's not going to get done, just the sooner you can let me know, the better, so I can just plan accordingly. Like it's all, well, I'm a human. I know you're a human. I know things come up and life happens. And,
Yeah.
especially with people getting, especially during the pandemic, when either people are losing loved ones or just getting sick and not being able to get to their studio, or being so sick they just can't do anything, even if they have all their gear and they work from home. They just aren't in a place to be able to do that. Whatever that is, just saying, hey, like if something comes up, it's all good. Just please let me know as soon as you can so that I can call an audible and make it happen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, knowing that, first of all, it's such a good point. Like life happens and you got to give people slack. And I always try to do that as well. Like, same way that like, a lot of my clients like give me slack and they say like, I know this is like a rush job, but could you get it to me, for within a few days or something? And, usually I'll try to do that anyways, but like, they understand that, life is busy and life is crazy. And I try to do the same thing with, the people that I'm delegating with.
Yeah.
And, I mean, one of the people I'm working with, like I chose to work with him because I felt like he was going to be the most available. And like, that was actually the reason why I chose him over a couple other candidates. I was just like, this person's around and he wants to work any day today. And that is super helpful for me when I don't exactly know how much work I'm going to have every week, but some things might be urgent. And like, that actually like was the reason why I chose this person, because like this person's going to be around for me. And like, and that was like the expectation, sort of thing of like, I don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but I need to know that somebody's going to be available pretty much most of the time. And, obviously within reason, and, usually I'm giving them some time, but that was like the reason why I chose to work with one person specifically, was because of availability.
And if you keep that in consideration, or I guess, let me rephrase that. That is awesome. And that is a totally valid thing to have as your priority when hiring.
Sometimes.
But as long as you go into it understanding that there may be unintended consequences. And in that sense, it's not, that sounds kind of negative, but somebody that is very open and very available probably is going to need more training, because they're probably less experienced. They're probably not as established in their career. So that's why they have availability. The busier, the busier somebody is, it's because they're really good at what they do. So if somebody's very available, that can be a blessing or a curse. So if you go into it, somebody's really available, that's awesome. And then you have the first pancake problem where you expect them to just nail it in the first try. I mean, that's not
going to go very well.
Yeah.
For me, with this specific example, I was like, I know I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time training this person, but then I'm going to have somebody who's more available to me, and I've trained them exactly how I want them to work. This is specifically for like podcast kind of editing stuff, and I felt it was very doable. And it is, and it's working out. But thankfully, but it's like, I know I'm going to have to spend more time up front on this, and that's like an investment I'm willing and want to make, actually. Yeah. So to speak. If that makes sense. And it all kind of circles.
Yeah, and I think maybe my final thought is that just like any skill, whether it's mixing, whether it's playing guitar, whether it's talking into a camera for social media, it's going to be uncomfortable until it becomes comfortable. It's going to be difficult until you get used to it and you figure out what works for you. And the same thing goes with delegation as a general concept. The more that you delegate and the more experience you have training people, teaching people, having the difficult conversations, the more that you do that, the better you're going to be at it and the less stressful it becomes. But just like any other skill, it's still January. So, going to the gym, getting your gym membership. Like
I didn't even try this year, man. That's not even on my
I will not confirm nor deny the gaining of COVID weight on for me. But but my point being, like, the first time you go back to the gym after 6 months away from it, it's gonna suck, and it's gonna suck very quickly, right? But once you get into that habit, all of a sudden you start to look forward to it. And I feel like I've gotten to the point in my delegation skill development, whatever you want to call it, that I look forward to it. I enjoy it. I like training people. I like having these conversations. I like helping the people that I hire to gain new skills that they can then use and make money from other producers by helping them out. So that building a team thing, like you mentioned earlier, it's huge, not just for me, but I think it's hopefully huge for them too, because I want them to get more than just the paycheck out of it. I want them to get the experience of not just working on the music, but the experience of learning how to do somebody else's workflow and how to adapt to somebody else's workflow and somebody else's needs, which is a very underappreciated skill set.
Dude, spot on, man. I was thinking about when you're talking about the team, like, I think I got this all from you. So props to you for like the concept of the team. I remember I don't remember when it was. I think it was when we did our first business coaching call back in the day. And you showed me, you're like, how you do proposals for this is the team. And that felt so good. Like, it's like, oh, it's not just me. It's like a whole team of people.
Yeah.
And we have your back. And like, there's something that really resonated with me. And that's something that I've been carrying forward since then of like, if it's not just me, it's me and a team. And that just even presents better to, the artists that you're working with. And, it's great. So I'm all about that. So props to you on that one. Or for bringing that to light to me, at least.
For beating it into your head for the past couple of years.
Yeah, basically, more or less. More or less. Let's not exaggerate, but, But awesome. Well, Carl, this has been so fun. I guess we'll just go over the do's and don'ts so people can remember it before we end the call. I feel like that's like the proper podcast thing to do.
Yes.
So remember, these are the do's and don'ts of delegation from Carl. Do expect the first few projects to suck. The pancake principle. Don't expect anyone to fully grasp your preferences and quirks right away. That was the first do's and don'ts. You get what you train for. Do start with a menial task, and don't start with a complicated creative task unless it's mastering. Do be granular with your explanations. Bonus is film a video of yourself going through the process, and don't make any assumptions about where they're at with their knowledge of that task, and make sure that you train them all the way. I'm just reading. This is the call. We're just back to the show notes here that Carl sent me. Do pay a fair wage, and don't hire the cheapest option because they're cheap for a reason. So those are the 4 do's and don'ts. And yeah, this is great. This is really eye opening, and hopefully the audience digs this and can start delegating more tasks and making more music and feeling good about building teams and all of that good jazz.
Yeah.
Any closing words?
Thanks for listening. You're wonderful. And thanks for having me, Ben. It's
a pleasure. Thanks for coming on again. And people should go check out Carl's stuff. There's links in the show notes of Carl's awesome resources and how to connect with him. We'll catch you guys on the next episode of Secret Sonics.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Secret Sonics. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If you've been digging the show, it would be awesome if you could share this episode or your favorite episode with a friend or two, and or leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcatcher of choice. That's it for now. Have a great week. Take care and dig in. See you soon. Bye-bye.